It's time for a rankings fight. 4 rankings disputes. I looked at Dave's rankings. I said, nope, don't agree with you there, my friend. Except I didn't call him a friend. I just said like nasty things to him.
You said some really terrible things, and I, for one, am very offended.
Yeah, so we got 4 rankings disputes. Then Jamie's going to weigh in, see what side he's on. Nico Collins versus Amon-Ra St. Brown. Chris Olave versus DeVonta Smith. A.J. Brown versus Drake London. Marvin Harrison Jr. versus Jameson Williams. I did not intend for these to be 4 wide receiver rankings disputes, but that's how it worked out. Hey, how those brackets looking, guys?
It's a great tournament so far. Love it.
You know, I thought that I had jinxed Florida when I said before the tournament that they were like the only team that I knew anything about. And I didn't mean to jinx them. I really am impressed by them. And then when they got off to the slow start in their second game, I was like, oh no, the jinx is real. But alas, they came through, and they are still my pick to win the whole thing.
Florida? Oh, that's great, Dave. I picked UConn to beat them, but that was a pure hate pick. It almost worked out. You guys know Will Lutz, right? Kicker?
Personally? Oh, no.
Well, he is actually in first place in the Fantasy Football Today bracket challenge.
Oh, no kidding.
Wow.
Well, it's a guy named Willie Lutz. It's probably
He's
not
kicking the competitions. But
yeah, but it's not him, but it's somebody named Willie Lutz who is in first place with 56 points. He's gotten 42 picks right. That is amazing. Congratulations.
It was 1 L or 2 in his first name.
2 L's and an IE at the end.
And Lutz is Lutz?
Yeah.
It might be Will Lutz.
It could be. You never know. He picked Duke.
I was at a restaurant over the weekend with Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett. You never know.
You were?
Like you were eating with them?
I wasn't eating with them. I mean, I saw them at another table.
You recognize them? You recognize them?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Pickett, I imagine, had a backwards hat on with long hair.
He did have long hair, but
yeah,
no hat.
And anytime anybody got near Trubisky, he kind of like went like this and like cowered in the fetal position.
No, they were.
I might recognize Trubisky. I don't think there's a chance I'd recognize Kenny Pickett. Good for you, Jamie. Okay.
Maybe let's get a picture of 3 random quarterbacks and see if Azer can tell which one is Kenny Pickett.
A pitcher of water or a pitcher on the mound?
Shut up.
All right, listen. Speaking of quarterbacks, the Giants signed Jameis Winston. So we're going to talk about that in just a moment. Boo. Yeah, anyway, we're going to talk about that in a moment here.
Boo!
I want to remind everybody.
The most fun team in the world.
They're going to be great for like 4 games.
I don't know who tweeted it, but someone had a really funny tweet about the Giants drafting Travis Hunter because he can catch all of Jameis's good passes and all of his bad passes.
Yeah. That tackle on all of his interceptions. Matt Harmon had the tweet of the year, though. He I can't remember when he sent it out. I think it was during last season.
It was after they beat the Colts.
Yeah, right. Like this win over the Colts is going to help them not get one of the top quarterbacks, and they're going to get Jameis, and Malik Neighbors is going to get 2,000 yards. Yeah. And if they do not get another quarterback, I believe it. But I think they're going to get another quarterback.
2,000 yards? I'll take the under. But I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
Watch CBS Sports HQ. It is the best way to stay up to date on everything going on right now. March Madness, NBA playoff race, NHL playoff race, etc. Golf, big time, for golf right now. So watch CBS Sports HQ on the CBS Sports app. All right, let's get to those news and notes. And then we'll do the rankings dispute. So the Giants, apparently they still could sign Russell Wilson. Obviously, they got the 3rd pick in the draft. They could draft a quarterback, but they did sign Jameis Winston to a 2-year, $8 million deal. All right, so Dave, what's your take here on the Giants quarterback situation?
The take is I'm assuming that Jameis is going to be like an in-season bridge quarterback for them and that they will take a rookie quarterback in the draft. I don't know if it'll be in round 1 or round 2, but we will get Jameis maybe for 4 games, 5 games. If the quarterback they get stinks, then maybe we'll get him for more. But obviously, we've got this long track record of Jameis Winston finding the receiver that he loves, throwing to him a ton, not caring about turnovers, just going ham. And the end result is that the receiver does exceptionally well. Last year's example, there were 2. It was Jerry Jeudy and then David Njoku. When Njoku was healthy, he had some good games with Jameis as well. So I am very optimistic that for the games Jameis starts, Malik Neighbors will deliver, maybe even over-deliver to our expectations. But whoever the rookie quarterback is, I think will end up playing more And that'll be the quarterback that we'll want to adjust our rankings to when it comes to Neighbors and, all those other great wide receivers for the Giants. Darius Slayton, Theo Johnson at tight end. Who else do they have?
Wandale.
Robinson. We always forget about Wandale.
Yeah.
He'll stink with Jameis because he doesn't run routes too far downfield.
Neighbors is wide receiver 4 for me right now.
Same.
Yeah. So the Giants, the last 3 years, they've thrown for between 3,350 and 3,520 yards. So let's just say like 3,450 yards on average the last 3 years. Jameis Winston, his 17-game pace, I got him at 7 seasons with 6 or more starts. 17-game pace, I'll just round up or down. 4,300, 4,350, 5,200, 5,000, 5,400, 3,100 one year with the Saints. He made 6 starts. He threw 25 times a game. And then last year with the Browns, I think it was 7 starts, 4,950. Like, this guy routinely throws for around 5,000 yards per 17 games. It's insane.
If he is the week 1 starter, like guaranteed by the time we're doing fantasy drafts, he will be a late round pick for almost everybody in one quarterback league.
Yeah, because he's been about a low, like, top 15 kind of quarterback. One year he was top 5 overall.
He'll win you weeks
per game. Yeah.
He can lose you weeks too, though.
Yeah, he can.
He can have a 300-yard, 1 touchdown, 3-pick week.
I'm not saying you want to go into your season with him as your starter, but if he's your backup, that's the type of guy that you can get some value for if you don't have a guaranteed bona fide starter that you like.
But just to the point of your stat, Adam, I would be shocked if he's the only quarterback for the Giants this year. Because if that's what happens, then Joe Shane and Brian Dable can call U-Haul right now.
I think there's
and get their move on. That they're not going to be there next year.
I think if they get Cam Ward, then I don't know that Winston's going to play at all. But if they don't, and it doesn't seem like right now, it seems like the Titans are going to stay put and take him, right?
I think so. Yes.
It's kind of what it's looking like.
Yeah.
I don't think there's another quarterback in this draft that necessarily should play ahead of Jameis Winston. I mean, maybe Sanders, but you know how I feel about him. And then Dart, I don't know. So it's not as unrealistic as it looks. And DeVito doesn't throw interceptions, but he also doesn't throw anything. So he doesn't do anything. So it's not as unrealistic right now as it might seem. 2 years, $8 million. That's obviously backup money, but he might be their best bet. Unfortunately, it's just
that's worse than backup money.
Let him start.
Yeah. Let him start. But if he's playing every week, then something very bad has happened to the rookie that they draft.
And I would say his best format, Jameis Winston's best format, if you happen to play in this format, would probably be a 4-point per passing touchdown league with -1 for interceptions.
Or 0.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm talking about like a realistic format here, but because it's usually either 6 points and -2 or 4 points and -1 or 4 points and -2. In 4-point per passing touchdown, -1 for the interception, he was QB 10 per game during his starts last year. In 6-point per passing touchdown leagues with 2 points down for an interception, he was QB 14 per game. It's a huge difference. So it's just something to keep in mind. Pittsburgh seems like they have a good chance to sign Aaron Rodgers. That seems like his most likely destination at this point. I'm going to wait till something happens before we react to that. The Browns signed former Bears guard Tevin Jenkins. The Chargers signed Tyler Conklin to a 1-year, $3 million deal. By the way, Jenkins could be a good player. He's been very injured, but he could be a pretty good player when he's healthy. But does anybody care about Tyler Conklin to the Chargers or Brandon Cooks to the Saints or Michael Gallup to the Commanders?
Conklin's interesting. I mean, look at what Will Dissly did last year with this team. So Conklin's had some good moments with the Jets and even with the Vikings. And so we could see him as a streamer, depending on how the rest of the offseason goes for Los Angeles. But this is an offense that likes to use its tight ends, a quarterback that likes to use his tight end. Can go back to just, again, what Will Dissly did last year. And he was somebody that was a low-end starter for those weeks when he was, involved. And even what was his name?
Stone Smart.
Yeah, I knew it was something interesting. Stone Smart. So we can look at this. Not somebody you want to draft, but someone to keep an eye on.
And Brandon Cooks is interesting too. It's almost the same thing as Conklin. I don't think anybody's going to draft Brandon Cooks. Maybe in deeper 3-receiver leagues, you'll take him to ride your bench. he'll have some boomer bust weeks, but we're going to talk about the Saints offense today. I'm not sure that I'm like crazy in love with their passing game, like some of us might have been before.
This hurts Rashid Shaheed.
Yeah. I mean, you can make the argument it'll hurt Olave a little bit. It'll hurt their tight ends a little bit.
I mean, it's going to hurt, I think, everybody, but it's still, look, he's following his offense coordinator, so a guy that he has had some time with.
I think it could be completely irrelevant. This guy had 54 targets, 26 catches in 10 games. He's 30. He'll be 32 years old in September. He just might not matter at all, Brandon Cooks. He hasn't been a good receiver for a long time at this point. 3 straight years less than 700 yards. I mean, okay, yards per game, 53.8, 41.1, 25.9. I don't know. It's certainly possible that he's just at the end of his career, and
he's definitely at the end of his career, but this is fantasy versus reality. He's going to just be a pain in the butt for, the other guys that are there.
I hope not, because then it's going to make my Olave argument not so great. The Texans signed offensive tackle Cam Robinson to a 1-year deal. Could be worth up to $14.5 million. They also signed offensive tackle Trent Brown to a 1-year deal that could be worth up to $3 million. So we know the Texans need some help. Maybe Cam Robinson is the replacement for Laramie Tunsil. Seems like that's probably a pretty big downgrade.
I think that's what they're going to go for. And I don't think it's a great replacement, but it's passable.
All right, let's take a quick break and come back and we'll do our rankings disputes. Nico Collins versus Amon-Ra St. Brown in full PPR after this.
Guys, can you feel it? Legends were born here. History was made here. These are hallowed grounds.
Hallowed grounds?
The NCIS squad room?
Well, I wasn't talking about that, but I was talking about Augusta National.
All right. It's finally time for the Masters.
I hear it's a tradition unlike any other.
Okay. A couple of elite wide receivers going to go in the first round. Amon-Ra St. Brown was wide receiver 7 per game in full PPR last year. Nico Collins was number 9 in full PPR last year. That does include a couple of partial games. He played only 18% of the snaps in week 18. He played like 13% of the snaps in week 5, Nico Collins. You take away those 2 games, he was actually on pace for 156 targets. And if he gets that, could be wide receiver 1, in my opinion. So I'm going Nico Collins. Dave has Amon-Ra St. Brown ahead of Nico Collins. I like Nico. It's going to be a pretty similar argument to what you're about to hear when we do A.J. Brown versus Drake London. If the targets are even close, I think it's going to be Nico. He is, on paper, looking at statistics, might sound crazy. He's arguably the best wide receiver in football. In terms of yards per route run, those types of things, the metrics are absolutely eye-popping. He is unbelievable. And he's not on this low pass volume team. The Texans, they have a new offensive coordinator. So take that for what it's worth. But 2 years,
it'll be the same scheme, just a different guy calling the plays.
2 years under DeMeco Ryans. They've been 12th with CJ Stroud, 12th in pass attempts, I think both years, whereas the Lions have been 9th and 16th. So maybe the pass attempts will be similar. There's just no target competition. And another thing I'd say about Nico Collins is maybe I'm making an excuse for him, but his numbers before the hamstring injury in week 5 were absolutely unbelievable. He came back. He just wasn't as good. He wasn't bad, but he wasn't nearly as good. And I just think, no Tank Dell, no Stephon Diggs, or maybe a little bit of Tank Dell. You tell me you're getting 150 or more targets from Nico Collins, and I am all over it. Whereas Jameson Williams emerging a little bit. Sam Laporta is a factor. They, at times last year, were extremely run-heavy, Detroit. So that's why I'm going Nico over St. Brown.
And even though all those things did happen in Detroit, Amon-Ra St. Brown averaged 1.1 more PPR points per game than Nico Collins. And then you're going to throw back at me, well, Nico left a couple of games, and that's why it happened. Maybe so, but we still started him for those games. I think they should count against Nico Collins.
I can't
They should. They absolutely should.
They do count in the standings, Dave, but they don't count in terms of what does this guy do when he's healthy. That's what the whole point of it is.
Okay, fine. I'm still going to take the receiver. And this isn't me slighting Nico. It's not like I'm calling Nico a bust. They're 2 spots apart.
Yeah.
They're
Nor
both
is
top
this me
8.
slighting St. Brown.
No, yes,
Absolutely.
it is. You hate Amon-Ra St. Brown. Everybody knows it. I can't wait to tell him. But St. Brown, consistency is going to be something that I'm going to lean on in off-season rankings. 18.7 PPR points per game in 2024, 20.7 in 2023, 16.7 in 2022, with 18.2 in his last 9. This is a wide receiver that you can use ink for 18 plus PPR points per game with. And Nico will be close to that. And I agree that Nico is the only show in town. Christian Kirk is not going to be a major threat to him, at least certainly not as anywhere near or more major, I should say, than what Stephon Diggs would have been if Diggs were healthy. Remember, Diggs is a little bit older now. But I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is just a little bit safer. I still think he's going to be the top target gainer in Detroit. And I still view him as an elite fantasy receiver. That I view both these guys as elite fantasy receivers. They both had over 8 targets per game last year. But St. Brown, to me, just has the consistency factor on his side.
All right, Jamie, what do you think?
I think this comes down to how you want to draft, because they're both most likely going to be awesome. They're both most likely going to be, if they stay healthy, first-round picks. But I do think that if Nico, I think you both said it the way that I feel about both these guys. I think if they both have the same amount of targets, Nico Collins will be better. But I also think, like Dave said it best, like there's the safety and consistency factor of Amon-Ra St. Brown. So if you are looking for, I think, the higher ceiling, you're going to probably lean toward Nico. If you're looking for just as high a ceiling, but maybe not the same heights, if that makes sense, then Amon-Ra St. Brown is as steady Eddie as you come. I remember writing this last year when I did the magazine story of the 7 best wide receivers, the 8 best wide receivers that we were looking at. The safest one by far was Amon-Ra St. Brown. And it's probably the same thing right now. Once you get past Chase and Jefferson, like you can make arguments against CeeDee Lamb. You can make, even Jefferson, you make arguments against because of JJ McCarthy, but you make arguments against CeeDee Lamb, Puka Nacua, Nico Collins. There's arguments against all these guys. There's very little arguments against Amon-Ra St. Brown. Yes, Jameson Williams may have a bigger role. Yes, there's an offense coordinator change. Yes, Sam Laporta's there. So he did all this last year, aside from the coordinator change. He was a part of the Jameson Williams explosion, if you want to call it that, or breakout. It was part of Sam Laporta's second half, consistency. He said it, the run game at times. These are all things that he's dealt with the last 2 years. So for me right now, I still lean Amon-Ra St. Brown. They are back-to-back. Depending on what the rest of the Texans offseason looks like, I may go Nico Collins, because that's just the way I tend to draft, is I'm looking for a little bit more upside. So I think, again, if Nico and Amon-Ra St. Brown have the same amount of opportunities, Nico will be a little bit better. Yeah.
Oh, I don't even think it'll be close. It won't be close in terms of yards. That's the thing. 2 of the last 3 years, Amon-Ra St. Brown's been like a 1,250 yard kind of guy per 17 games. 2022, he really busted out. How many yards did he have that season, Dave? He had like 1,500 yards or something, right?
I'd have to look it up. 2023.
Sorry. He was on pace for 1,600 yards. So if he can be that kind of player, then it's close. If he's more like the 1,300 yard guy per 17 games, or last year he was 1,263, that's where I see the edge for Nico Collins is in yards. And even though Amon-Ra St. Brown is very safe, I also think Nico Collins is extremely safe. I don't really see a downside argument for Nico. Do you?
No, but it's, again, there's a track record here of what Amon-Ra St. Brown has done. You could say, Nico just doesn't have the same resume.
Oh, I think it's incredible that Nico had 17.6 PPR points per game last year, given all the issues in Houston, the offensive line being bad, CJ Stroud not taking a step forward in his second year. They didn't play many games where both Tank Dell and Stephon Diggs were healthy, but there were a majority where one of the two were on the field, and he still came through for pretty good numbers. If you're going to nitpick with Nico and say, well, the offensive line might still be a problem and Stroud might not be better, well, okay, what does that mean? Does that mean he's going to be at like 16.5? Is that going to be what his floor is going to be? I think people would be a little disappointed if they took Nico in round 1, and that's what he ended up doing. And I think Amon-Ra St. Brown could certainly best that number, but that's still pretty good for a fantasy contributor. So I don't think there's a legitimate downside case for either of these wide receivers.
All right, let's go to our next one. Is A.J. Brown versus Drake London. They are back-to-back in Dave's rankings. This was one where I may have changed my mind while I was doing the research. because I think it's actually easier to make a case for Drake London than AJ Brown in full PPR.
Correct.
However, I'll go ahead and play devil's advocate. I will take AJ. I don't know if it's not really a devil's advocate, but I'll take AJ Brown over Drake London. And here's why. I just think he's so much better than Drake London, which again is not a slight to Drake London, but AJ Brown is another guy. If he were if AJ Brown were on the Vikings, he'd be unstoppable. I could see him going for like 1,800 yards and 13 touchdowns. He's that good of a player. The only thing that holds him back is low pass volume. We're not seeing that from Drake London. What we're seeing from Drake London is like a nice, solid player. He doesn't make a lot of big plays. I talked about his yak so much last year. It was a little bit better, but still pretty bad last year. He just doesn't do a lot after catching the ball. So I think he'll get more targets than AJ Brown. I think he's going to need probably 20 more targets than AJ Brown to be better than AJ Brown. And I expect the Eagles to pass a lot more. Fun fact, not more than the Falcons, but more than they did last year. Fun fact.
Me too.
These two teams, believe it or not, even though the Falcons threw the ball a decent amount, these two teams were last in the NFL in green zone pass rate last year. The Falcons, oddly enough, they just became super run heavy when they got inside the 10-yard line. Drake London led the NFL with an unbelievable rate of percentage of his team's targets in the green zone. He had over 50%. He had like 54% of his team's targets in the green zone. That was number one in the NFL. AJ Brown has also led the NFL in that stat. He did it in 2022. But anyway, if the Falcons throw the ball more, they become a better passing touchdown team, then we've got huge upside for London. So I did find it kind of easy to make the case for London, but I'm going to stick with AJ Brown, Dave, just because I think he is a superior player. He is a truly elite alpha wide receiver. And even last year, which wasn't a great year for him, he still averaged more fantasy points per game, just barely, than Drake London in PPR.
16.7 to 16.5. You're right. And that's with Drake London having nearly 2 targets per game more than AJ Brown. But if I multiply 2 targets per game by 17 games, Adam, you said it, that if Drake London's getting 20 more targets over the course of a season than AJ Brown, he's going to be better in full PPR. And this is absolutely format dependent. Half PPR, non-PPR, I'm making a beeline to AJB. But Drake London, with Penix throwing to him, I think it's going to end up being a very good thing for him. I think he's going to be the trusted number one guy. And I think he's going to continue to see high target volume. You are not drafting Drake London for his athleticism. You are drafting him for the passing volume. You are drafting him for the green zone target share, like you talked about. Certainly that can lead to some good touchdown production. But if it's a league where catches don't count as much and big plays count more, then AJ Brown's your guy. Completely format dependent between these two, but in full PPR, I will lean toward London because I think he'll get more targets. And you mentioned it, there is a little bit more upside, I would say, with London based on the target volume. And if the quarterback is better than what the Falcons had for most of last year, then London can certainly outperform AJB.
I don't know that I agree with the upside take. I still think Brown has more upside because if the Eagles can get back to passing for over 4,000 yards, last year they passed for about 3,500 yards. The 2 years before that is like 4,300 yards, 4,000 yards. Then I think AJ Brown has more upside than London, but he probably has more downside too, just because of the offense. But okay, Jamie, what do you think? Brown or London?
They're back to back, so like both these guys a lot, but I lean Brown more than London based on the upside. I do think that if Brown does what he's capable of doing, then he's top 5 upside. I don't think Drake London has that. I think what we saw last season from Drake London is kind of his ceiling. And I'm a big Drake London guy from last year, but I don't know how much better he can be, just based on everything that's going on with this team, everything that's going on with him. We still don't know what the rest of this receiving core is going to look like because I think they had somebody in the draft. But in terms of the downside, if Penix stinks, like this could be bad for Drake London. There's a lower floor, I think, for what he can be. Like last year was kind of the floor, I think, for AJ Brown. And I think we all kind of share the same sentiment. Like we expect the Eagles to be a little bit more pass happy, simply because the run game I don't think will be as successful for what Saquon Barkley's coming off of. All the work, the history of 2,000-yard rushers. There will be a step back here. So especially if Barkley misses any time, then it's more on Jalen Hurts, more on the passing game, and I think that favors AJ Brown's ceiling. I just think there's another year that he can get to where Drake London can't.
So I think that that's an important direction that we could send this conversation to. How much do we really believe that Saquon takes a big step back next year? Because if we're really buying into Saquon not being as efficient, maybe missing some time, 28-year-old running back coming off of 482 touches over the season and the postseason. Yeah. Like if we really believe that, then I think that it's a no-brainer that the Eagles will throw more. And that would obviously help AJ Brown. And now here I am playing devil's advocate the other way. I just quickly did this. Maybe I wish I had done this before I did my rankings. Remember how in week 18, Penix started for Atlanta, meaningless game. Mooney didn't play. Drake London had 40.7 PPR points. If we Azer stat that game out, he averaged 15 PPR points per game flat. So I think if you do buy into London, I think you have to buy into Penix as well. And what if Penix pulls a Stroud? We'll learn about Penix during the preseason and the lead up and what the reports are like coming out of Atlanta. But if we believe two things: one, Penix isn't a lock to get better, and two, Saquon Barkley is going to get worse, and the Eagles are going to have to change their philosophy a little bit, then this is a U-turn. We should go with AJ Brown before Drake London in all formats.
This is where Browns finished per game in 3 seasons with Philadelphia. 7th per game in 2022 in both non and full PPR. 2023, he actually had 158 targets in 17 games. He was wide receiver 12 per game in non-PPR, wide receiver 7 per game in full PPR, only caught 7 touchdowns. In 2024, he was 10th per game in non and 13th per game in full PPR. Whereas London last year was, I think, wide receiver 14 per game in full PPR. And that was the question. Jamie, you said maybe he hit his ceiling last year. That was kind of the question I had about London. Can he be better? I mean, I think he obviously can if Penix has, a really good season. But also that stat about them being so run heavy, the lowest pass rate in the green zone, so weird. And the second fewest green zone pass attempts, which it was just, I don't really get that imbalance, but I mean, obviously get the ball to Bijan. I get that, but it was just, I don't know. I just thought maybe there was a chance for more touchdown opportunities for him. But that being said, he did catch 9 touchdowns last year. It's not like he had a bad touchdown year.
Do we know how many of them were like longer than 20 yards?
No, but probably not that many.
That's what I'm saying. Like I'm starting to really, I'm changing my mind as we sit here.
Yeah.
So I don't like doing that. I'm sorry that I'm doing that, but it's kind of how I'm feeling.
I think the thing with London is it's just a wild card. If Penix is awesome, then London will benefit in a huge way and probably be better than AJ Brown. But it's a wild card. I think what you saw from London last year is probably, I don't say easy to replicate, but it's something I think that can be done again. Like AJ Brown's just been so solid and still in his prime. And again, depends on how you view what the Eagles offense will look like next year.
All right, let's get to our next one here.
Real quick, London's longest touchdown last year was from 30 yards out. It was a deep ball from Cousins against the Raiders in week 15. All of his other, he had a touchdown from 21 yards out, from 20 yards out. Everything else was in the red zone. I'm sorry, James?
Cousins played in week 15?
He did.
That was his last game. He got benched that game, I think. Or, I don't know, he threw like 17 passes that game.
4 touchdowns inside the 10 for Drake London last year. So the two stats that, again, I wish I'd seen this before I came on the show, but it's the offseason. It's okay. Only 4 green zone touchdowns for Drake London. That's not good. 15 PPR points per game if you take out his biggest game in a meaningless game without his number 2 wide receiver. I think the better picture, Jamie, to paint on Drake London is he's probably more of a 15 to 16 PPR point per game guy. And if I'm going to play the consistency card like I did earlier with Amon-Ra St. Brown, I've got to do it with AJ Brown too. 16.7 PPR points per game or more each of the last 3 years. It's Brown.
All right. That's the thing, Wes. We're going to keep seeing things that we didn't know about. There's a lot of stats out there, a lot of information. That's why I really like digging into these players. All right, Chris Olave versus DeVonta Smith. I don't think they were particularly close in your rankings. If you have them in front of you, I think they were 4 or 5 spots apart.
They were.
I like Olave better than DeVonta Smith. I've gone first each of the first 2 times. So tell me why you have DeVonta Smith ahead of Chris Olave.
Well, let's start with the theme that I've been using quite a bit today, and that's consistency. DeVonta Smith's been 14 to 15 PPR points per game each of the last 3 years. There's been an inconsistency factor with how he's delivered those numbers, but it's still something that he's done. There's obviously a target crunch there that has slowed DeVonta Smith down, but he's gotten the job done. We're talking about 2 players that you'll draft as number 3 wide receivers. And we can make the argument that on paper, Chris Olave he's got the upside to be better than a number 3 receiver. But he's really only shown that in bits and pieces over the past 2 years, or past 3 years. He's been in the NFL 3 years. This is a talent who I liked a lot, but I can't ignore what I've seen from Olave over the last 3 seasons. His best season was 14.5 PPR points per game. We've seen DeVonta Smith. He had 14.2 2 seasons ago. Last year, Chris Olave. Okay, it's a new offense. Derek Carr's there. This should be the year where Olave gets a lot of work, becomes the number 1 guy. He had 7+ targets in 2 games last year. He didn't play a full season, obviously, because of the concussions. He averaged 5.5 targets per game and didn't even average 10 PPR points per game. I can't unsee that. And even with Kellen Moore,
man, you got to get in. He had 2 games where he played like 12% or less of the snaps.
I know, but you can't ignore what happened in those games and say that it's fluky. It could happen again.
No, but if you're going to tell me how many targets he has per game, that's the whole point.
So go ahead. So if you take those out, what's the number?
44 divided by 6. It's like 7 targets.
All right. And so the one thing that I did want to say.
Oh, not 44, 42. It's exactly 6.
It's
per,
7
per game.
7 per game. Yep. If you could guarantee me that Olave is going to be north of 7 targets per game, I'd feel a lot better about it. But this is still an offense that I've got questions about, from the offensive line to the quarterback, who's backing up the quarterback. Does Derek Carr play a full season? I don't have questions anymore about the play caller. Kellen Moore, I'm good with it. But I don't want to buy into Chris Olave for a 4th straight season when I know that DeVonta Smith has given me some consistency. And going back to what we talked about 7 minutes ago with Philadelphia's offense, if they're not going to run as much in 2025, that means they're going to throw more. Maybe Dallas Goedert isn't even as big of a factor in the offense. He might not even be on the team. That would kick down the door for DeVonta Smith to have a huge year. And so I'm taking the number 3 receiver that's gotten the job done for 3 straight years in a better offense.
I like Olave better because I think he'll lead his team in targets, and I don't think we've seen the best of him. And yes, only 7 targets per game. I mean, that's not even good. Like 7 targets per game in his 6 healthy games. But I would say we have to remember that Derek Carr played in 5 of those games. Derek Carr threw 27.2 passes per game. And there were 2 blowout wins. There was 1 game where they had the ball for 20 minutes. So they will throw more. But I won't go on my big, long spiel. I'm going to send it over to Jamie now. You tell me, Chris Olave or DeVonta Smith?
Well, first off, if Dave's scenario plays out and Dallas Goedert's not there, nobody's taking Chris Olave over DeVonta Smith.
So
unless they add somebody else along the way.
I got to say, I don't know. It's very weird because obviously we know the deal with DeVonta Smith. Like, he's not that good when everyone's healthy. And
he's not that productive when everybody's healthy.
He's amazing when someone's out. But like Dallas Goedert has such a small role. You know, it's not like Goddard is it's not like he's Kittle. And this is
No, but there is that track record that when
I don't think
one of those guys is out, the other guy steps up.
I don't think Dallas Goedert's leaving the team. So this is kind of a moot.
Okay.
I do think that, again, this is probably going to come down to how you draft. If you're looking for more upside, if Chris Olave hits in his offense versus DeVonta Smith being what he's been in the same offense, based on what has happened to him, Olave's ceiling is higher. But to Dave's point, we just haven't seen it from Olave yet. So if you're going to take the more safe, you're going to take the safer route, then DeVonta Smith is the safer route, because there'll be some games where A.J. Brown or Dallas Goedert, or as we saw last year, both of them miss. Then DeVonta Smith has top 5 upside. When those guys are there, he's more of like a top 25 to 30 receiver, which is why we're drafting him as a number 3 receiver. Chris Olave has the opportunity and the ability to be a top 15 caliber wide receiver, but it just has been small sample sizes of that. So, if I hit 2 home runs with my first 2 receivers in the 3 receiver league, I'm probably going to take Chris Olave to try and see if I hit 3 home runs. If I don't have the best 2 picks at wide receiver because, I just missed out on a guy, or I went running back, and now I don't have the receivers that I like. Well, Chris, then it depends again how you draft. Does Olave make more sense because you're trying to hit the home run, or you want to get a little bit more of a safety factor? So I like Olave slightly better, but they're back to back again. It's very interesting that these are the receivers that we've taken. But it's like 20 wide receiver 26, 27, or 25 and 26, not ranked as starters. I just think that if Olave finally can get everything together, he's got a chance to be pretty special.
Yeah, I don't know if I still feel like he has a chance to be pretty special, but I do feel like he has a chance to be top 15 wide receiver. And it feels like DeVonta Smith, unless A.J. Brown gets hurt, can't crack the top 15 because he never has per game. I think 15th per game was his best season. Let's just take a look at their best seasons. Both of them, it was their second season in the league. 2022, DeVonta Smith, 95 catches, 1,200 yards, 7 touchdowns on 136 targets. Chris Olave.
He had 18.1 in his final 8 games with Goddard out or barely playing that year. So that's an example of Goddard being limited / out, what DeVonta Smith could do.
Yeah, no, I know that's been the case, but Goddard had been a bigger. That's why I was optimistic about Smith going into the last year. It's like I didn't really think Goddard's getting old. He's not that productive anymore. Like he's not what he used to be. So I really thought Smith was going to take that step.
Do you know what Smith was in 2023 without Goddard?
He was terrific, right?
21.4 PPR points per game, 9 targets per game. It's 3-week sample size, but 3 weeks without Goddard.
And what did he do in 2 weeks without A.J. Brown? He had 2 games with like 7 catches, weeks 2 and 3. You can look it up. He was great.
I mean, I've got it right here. 17.3 PPR points per game in 10 games where either Brown or Goddard did not play.
But in 6 games where they were all healthy, or 7 games where they were all healthy, he had 2 games with double-digit PPR fantasy points. So, yeah, I don't know. We kind of know what he is. Olave has not had a better season than Smith yet. That's the biggest argument against Olave, is like he hasn't even done what DeVonta Smith did because he doesn't score any freaking touchdowns. It's so frustrating. Smith gets you 7 touchdowns a year. Olave would love that, but things can change. Things change with McLaurin. That was my comp for Olave. I thought he was basically a younger version of McLaurin. We just get to 7, 8 touchdowns, he's going to outproduce DeVonta Smith. I feel confident. I don't know that it'll happen, but if he does get there, he'll be better than Smith. I'm just going to take the guy who I think is going to be number 1 on his team in targets. And even though Hurts is a better quarterback than Derek Carr, raw passing numbers, just because of volume, might favor the Saints. All right, let's take a break. We'll come back. We got one more. We got Marvin Harrison Jr. versus Jameson Williams after this.
One of golf's elite courses, Quail Hollow, hosts the game's top players at the PGA Championship this May on CBS.
Marvin Harrison Jr. or Jameson Williams? How about Jamie? You want to start? Who do you like better here?
Marvin Harrison Jr., but it's close. Again, I think you're looking at the guy who could hopefully be the alpha on his team, and that's saying a lot because Trey McBride's pretty good. Whereas Williams could easily be third on his team, based on how Laporta scores touchdowns and Amon-Ra St. Brown and what he does. Run game obviously going to favor Detroit as well. I'm just more hopeful that Marvin Harrison lives up to the, prospect that he was coming into the league. I was encouraged to hear what Mike Renner said when we had him on last week, about Marvin Harrison and just the ability for him to hopefully have a year or 2 bounce back season. I certainly don't think he'll be as bad as he was in his rookie season. Whereas Jameson can disappear at times, so I just like the upside of what Marvin Harrison will hopefully be. Again, it's more about who's got a chance to be the alpha in his offense. And I don't think Jameson Williams can do that with the guys that are in front of him.
Yeah. Dave, this is kind of the same argument as Olave versus Monte. So
very
that's
true.
why I'm also taking Marvin Harrison Jr. And it really seems like this offseason, Marvin Harrison Jr.'s production is a huge priority for the Cardinals. Like, Kyler Murray has basically said, like, we have to get better. The 2 of us, we're going to work on it. We're going to work on our chemistry, this and that. So I'm hopeful for a bounce back. And it's not even St. Brown. He is, obviously who is, it's Laporta's presence too that gets me with Jameson Williams, especially in the red zone. Jameson Williams is not much of a factor there. So that's why I'm going Harrison over Williams. I think Williams' ceiling is a little bit capped by the target competition.
This is very much in pencil. We know that if Marvin Harrison comes to training camp and he's a little bit more refined, I honestly, I don't even know if refined is the right word. He's got to be faster. He's got to play faster. If he can do those things and earn more than the 6.8 targets per game that he had last season, then this is a slam dunk for Harrison. He's just got to do it. We've got to learn about it. We've got to see it. And that's the story. Like if he can end up being the top target getter amongst everybody in Arizona and then be a factor on, longer plays like Jameson Williams, it's a piece of cake. If it's not happening, if he's not separating with speed, if he's not going to get that huge target volume, if there's talk about another wide receiver in Arizona, if there's talk of the run game being a bigger factor for the Cardinals, it's going to be a little bit harder to trust Marvin Harrison in that second year because if his floor, I mean, look, both these guys could have a low floor, but I would rather have the receiver with the smash game potential of Jameson Williams, where he can have 4 targets, 2 catches, 150 yards and a touchdown, and then come back the next week and still get good volume the next week and give me a 6 for 88, something like that. We saw that from him a bunch of times toward the end of the year, which was when Sam Laporta started to get more involved in that offense. And I think there's another step that Jameson Williams can take as far as being more efficient on the target volume that he has. I don't have to worry about Jamo's speed either. And we saw enough from Jameson Williams to know that he improved as a route runner. He improved his technique on the field. He's somebody who I think can come back. And I don't know if he can have a better year necessarily. He was at 14.2 over the course of the season, but maybe a little bit more consistent. And if Marvin Harrison just doesn't take that second year leap, then Jameson Williams will be the guy.
What's interesting about this conversation is that I'm not really convinced that Marvin Harrison Jr. is a better player than Jameson Williams. It's like I've got conviction that A.J. Brown is a better wide receiver than Drake London, which again, it's not a slight on London. Brown's amazing.
Right.
I feel confident that Nico is better than St. Brown, even though St. Brown is great. I just love Nico. I don't know. Jameson might be better. Like Jameson's really, really good.
That's true. I've been playing fantasy for many years. I've been doing analysis for many years. The one thing I will say is that opportunity trumps talent.
Yeah.
When it comes to fantasy football and who you'd want to start. And so that goes back to, Marvin Harrison might not, Marvin Harrison is never going to be faster than Jameson Williams. He will never be as agile or explosive. But if he's going to see 2 more targets per game and he's going to work on his craft and again, take that second year jump, then he'll be the better receiver for fantasy.
Okay.
I just don't know if I'm not ready to call that yet, which is why Jameson's ranked ahead of Marv.
All right,
Moped Marv.
What's the matter, Marv? Are you afraid? Okay. Home Alone. It's a Home Alone. So we have 1,300 people in the bracket challenge. 1,300 brackets. I am in 173rd place.
This is going to be great. Go ahead.
Jamie is in 1,301st place because he forgot to hit submit. So that's not good. Dave, what about you?
I think I'm in like 700th place.
Okay.
With 2 of my final 4 teams gone.
Let's see where I rank.
But I didn't make any of my picks.
Yeah, who did make your picks?
AI.
AI.
I don't think AI is perfected yet, at least not when it comes to the NCAA tournament. AI had Marquette and UConn in my final 4. So I figured I couldn't do any worse than last year. And I was a year too early on saying that the ACC wasn't any good.
This bracket. Oh, this guy didn't even finish his bracket.
SEC got what? 8 of the Sweet 16?
Something like that. They're great.
They really?
Mm-hmm.
Big Ten, I feel like, has had the Big Ten went 8-0, I think, in the first round. Or they had the most wins without a loss in tournament history. It's actually been great. It's been a great tournament. We have Dan Schneier coming on Wednesday. I'm going to tell him about Saturday night. I went to a sports bar and watched the game, the Wisconsin game, with a Wisconsin grad named Dan. It wasn't him. We'll talk about that awesome story.
Dan was probably there. He just left you and you left you alone.
Yeah. He left me with his brother who had no interest in talking to me. Okay, we will talk to you on Wednesday on Fantasy Football Today. Thanks, everybody. See you later.